Hey everyone, my name is Moss and I'm here to talk about fuck all. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you're coming back, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna try doing another one of these art advice videos since I think the last one went pretty well. This won't be the only kind of video I'll be doing on my channel. There will be different formats that I want to try out, but that's besides the point. So in this video, I'm gonna be explaining my art process, which is actually another idea that came from one of my commenters. Shout out to Violin Dragon. Thank you for the idea and thank you for the compliments, I really appreciate it. Now let's get started. So the first step I do is thumbnailing. From what I understand, thumbnailing is just a very quick and bare bones doodle just to figure out the composition of the piece I want to do, such as the character's pose and maybe the setting they're in. It doesn't have to be super detailed or whatever, just the general shapes. Once I've decided on a thumbnail that I like, I resize that baby to the full canvas and we start drawing for real. So in this speed paint, I decided to draw one of my original characters, Leon Jackson. He's a half demon and half human boy who loves punk rock, and also a bit of a party animal. I won't go into too much detail about him right now since that's not what this video is about, but just know he's my sweet little boy and I adore him. Perhaps I'll go more in depth about my characters in another video. So for the sketch portion is where a more solid idea of the piece begins to form. For this one, I had Leon just do sort of a generic cutesy jump in the air pose, looking all smiley and happy like he always does. For this entire drawing, I mostly use Clip Studio's default G pen. I download like a million Clip Studio brushes from the asset store like every week, and yet I still always use this one for all my pieces. I use the top right square there called the navigator to, well, navigate my drawing. I use it to move around and zoom into my drawings way too much because I'm a horrible perfectionist and it's hurting my back. Please help. Anyway, I also use the navigator to frequently flip my drawings to make sure it's balanced and doesn't look all wacky, because I'm sure a lot of artists know the feeling of thinking a drawing is looking super fucking good, but then you remember to flip it and it looks awful. So pro tip, flip your drawings in the early stages or else you're gonna be 5 hours into the drawing and you finish doing the line art, you put your blood, sweat and tears trying to make it look clean and neat. Suddenly, you remember to flip the canvas, and when you do, it looks like absolute ass, and you feel the need to fix it, but then you'd have to fix the line art again, and it's just so much work, so then you ignore it and keep it as it is, and pray that no one notices how off balance your drawing is. Not me though, I'm built different. Everyone should make a habit out of flipping their drawings in the early sketching stages. It helps you spot your mistakes faster, so yeah. Now that we're done with the sketch, we're moving on to the next phase of this drawing, line art. Now there's a lot of stigma from artists about how their line art always looks worse than the sketch, and how it's the part of drawing almost everyone dreads. Typically people set the sketch layer opacity down and then put a new layer on top, and so they do the line art on that new layer. I'm not typical people though. For anyone who wants their line art to look as good as the sketch, this is an industry secret that nobody wants you to know, so I'm taking the risk to tell you guys this simple trick. It's not simple actually, but it'll help. Make the sketch your line art. What I mean by this is that you keep your sketch opacity as is, don't do anything to it, and then you sculpt the line art from it. You erase the bits of the sketch that makes it, you know, sketchy, and make it clean and nice and neat, like how line art usually is. Maybe make the lines thicker at the parts you want to emphasize. I'm bad at explaining it, but if you're looking at the speed paint, you'd understand what I mean. I started doing my line art this way a few months ago, and oh my god, it's been a huge relief for me since then. Back when I still did line art on new layers, I would spend so much time redrawing the same lines over and over again to make sure it was perfect because I'm a perfectionist. It's so Virgo of me. I'm just kidding, don't take that seriously, I'm not like an astrology nerd. And so I always lamented at how my line art didn't look as good as the sketch. Not anymore. That's because my line art is built from the sketch, so it always looks good, mostly. So yeah, that's my line art life hack for you. So the next step we're moving on to is coloring, of course. For this, I make sure the line art is completely closed off and doesn't have any gaps. That's because in coloring, I take the magic wand tool, select the area outside the line art, and then invert it, put a new layer underneath the line art, and then fill the inverted selected area in with whatever color, usually the character's skin color. This is to make sure that there's no little white pixels or empty pixels when coloring, because sometimes those things pop up and make coloring really annoying. My next step is to make a new folder and equip it to the layer containing that filled in area. And so within that folder, I make separate color layers for each part of the drawing. As you can hopefully see, I draw within the lines and then fill it in with the desired color. I also try to minimize the amount of layers by coloring certain parts that are distant from each other on the same layer. They have to be a bit distant so as to not interfere with the shading part. Speaking of which, that's our next step. So for shading, I actually use a specific brush for it that I kinda customize on my own, not to brag. So in the India ink brushes, there's a brush called Smooth, and I adore this brush so freaking much. I use it for doodles and whatnot, but then I had the revelation that I could modify it into a more watercolor blendy type brush, and that's what I often use to shade. I'll put up the settings on screen now if you want to make that brush yourself. It's super easy. There will be some notes too, so feel free to screenshot it. When I shade, I don't just use a darker version of the base color. I actually use different dark shades of a certain color that would fit the mood of the drawing, or just shift the hue wheel a little bit. Like for example, Leon's shorts here, I used the sort of indigo to shade the blue denim. Not denim, I mean denim. And I would consistently use similar dark shades of indigo to shade different parts of the drawing. I shade by just putting down the dark color, then color picking the base color underneath and blend it in with the shading. I try not to blend too much so that it doesn't look so muddled and still a bit solid. Then I do some minimal lighting, which is the same with my shading process but with lighter colors. I also do this thing called bounce light, which I learned from other artists. It's where you color pick from the surrounding environment or other parts of the drawing and apply it to the edge of the shading. Just a teensy bit. I'm gonna be real, I don't know the color theory behind it, but I think it makes the drawing pop out more and a bit more vibrant. Then comes the background. Oh boy, the background. I usually don't do like actual backgrounds, I just do like a gradient and put random shapes and patterns and call it a day. And I did the same here, Lamau. I used a lot of halftones and like confetti brushes I downloaded on the asset store to brush up on a drawing and give it a bit of character. But other than that, I don't do much for the background. The final step of my process is to use correction layers. I mainly use the tone curve and color balance correction layers and adjust it to my liking. What this does is that it modifies the colors in a way that makes it look more pleasant and unique, and then I slap my watermark onto the drawing and we're done. So yeah, I'm a gamer. So yeah, that's the process of how I draw. Now this is not the only way you can draw, I'm just sharing my own process in the hopes that it may help someone else. There's no one set way to draw, that's for you to figure out. You should find a process that you find comfortable, fun, and convenient. And this is what I've come up with. I hope this video was somewhat comprehensible and helpful to you guys. I didn't want to explain every single technical step of the program to you guys because that would be really boring, but maybe one day I'll do like a Clip Studio tutorial if they sponsor me, but that's very doubtful. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and comment and maybe subscribe. It would be super appreciated, but no pressure of course. As always, links to my social media will be in the description along with my commission info. If you're interested in commissioning me for a personal drawing, hit me up in my business email, edgymoss@gmail.com. And if you have any video ideas you want me to do, just let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.